The Tuesday morning, Wallace announced I would accompany him to the corporate gala. I knew something was wrong. In 25 years of marriage, my husband had never once wanted me by his side at any business function. I was the wife who stayed home, who kept quiet, who made sure his shirts were pressed and his scotch was waiting when he returned from his important meetings with important people. "You're coming with me Friday night," he said without looking up from his Wall Street Journal. The newspaper trembled slightly in his hands, a detail I noticed but didn't comment on. Wallace hated being seen as anything less than completely in control. I paused mid-pour, the coffee pot hovering over his cup. "To the Morrison Properties event?" "No." He folded the paper with sharp, precise movements. "The Grand Hyatt Gala. The new owner of Ashford Industries will be there. I need to make the right impression." My hand steadied, but my heart didn't. "Are you sure you want me there? I don't really have anything appropriate to wear to something that fancy." Wallace's gray eyes flicked up at me with that familiar look of disdain I'd learned to read like a second language. "Find something. Buy something if you have to." He reached into his wallet and counted out 10 $20 bills, laying them on the marble countertop like a judgment. "Just don't embarrass me." Don't embarrass me. Those 3 words had been the soundtrack of our marriage for over 2 decades. I took the money, knowing it would have to cover not just a dress, but everything else. Shoes. Maybe a clutch if I could find one cheap enough. Wallace gave me $200 a month for personal expenses. Everything had to come from that allowance. My clothes, my toiletries, even the birthday cards I bought for his business associates' wives. After 25 years, I had become an expert at making nothing look like something. That night, alone in our bedroom while Wallace worked late in his study, I opened the small wooden jewelry box I kept hidden beneath winter sweaters in the back of my closet. My fingers found the familiar weight of the silver locket first, the only piece of jewelry I owned that Wallace hadn't bought me. Inside was a photograph so old it had faded to sepia tones. A young man with dark eyes and a smile that had once made me believe in forever. Tucked beside it, barely visible, was a single strand of infant hair, so fine it was almost translucent. A baby I'd carried for 2 months and lost 30 years ago. A baby whose father had no idea had ever existed. Beneath the locket, wrapped in a silk handkerchief, was the emerald ring. I lifted it carefully, watching it catch the lamplight and throw tiny green reflections across my palm. The gold band had tarnished slightly over the decades, but the stone was still brilliant, a deep forest green that reminded me of Colorado in summer. "It's been waiting for the right woman," Marcus had said that spring evening by the campus lake, his hands shaking as he slipped it onto my finger. "It's been waiting for you." I had worn it for exactly 3 months before everything fell apart. The memory came flooding back, sharp and painful as broken glass. Spring 1995, Colorado State University. I was 22, working 3 jobs to supplement my partial scholarship, when I met Marcus Ashford in the library during finals week. I was sprawled across 3 chairs, surrounded by Victorian literature textbooks and empty coffee cups, when he appeared with that slightly tilted head that meant he was thinking hard about something. "You look like you could use some real food," he'd said, his voice warm with amusement. "There's a 24-hour diner near campus. Best apple pie in Colorado." I'd looked up, ready to politely decline. I didn't have money for late-night diners, and I certainly didn't have time for whatever game rich boys played with scholarship girls like me. But when I met his eyes, dark and serious and completely sincere, something inside me shifted. "I can't afford diners," I'd said honestly. "I didn't ask if you could afford it," he'd replied gently. "I asked if you were hungry." That was Marcus. Direct, honest, cutting through pretense to get to the heart of things. We became inseparable after that night. He introduced me to his world of cocktail parties and country clubs, but he also slipped away from those gatherings to explore mine. Midnight study sessions, shared pizza in tiny dorm rooms, conversations about books and dreams and the future we were building together, piece by careful piece. 6 months later, he proposed by that campus lake with his grandmother's emerald ring. I'd said yes without hesitation. We were young and believed that love was enough to overcome any obstacle. We were wrong. 2 weeks after our engagement, Victoria Ashford's office, downtown Denver. The memory of that afternoon still made my hands tremble. Marcus's mother had summoned me to the gleaming high-rise where Ashford Industries was headquartered. I'd gone expecting to discuss wedding plans. Instead, I found myself sitting across from a woman whose cold eyes and calculating smile made my skin crawl. "Miss Campbell," Victoria Ashford had said, leaning back in her leather chair like a predator who had cornered her prey. "I understand my son has made you certain promises." I'd lifted my chin, trying to project a confidence I didn't feel. "Marcus and I are engaged. We're planning to marry after graduation." She'd laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "Are you? Tell me, what do you imagine married life will be like? The country club memberships, the charity galas, the summers in Aspen. Do you think you'll fit into our world?" "I think love is more important than social status," I'd replied, though my voice had begun to waver. Victoria had studied me for a long moment, and something flickered across her face. Something almost like sadness. Then it was gone, replaced by cold determination. Love. She'd repeated the word like it tasted bitter. "Let me tell you about love, Miss Campbell. I was 21 when I fell in love with a man above my station. My family had nothing. My father worked in a factory, my mother cleaned houses. But I was beautiful, and I was smart, and I thought that would be enough. I'd stared at her, confused by this unexpected confession. It wasn't enough," she'd continued, her voice hardening. "His family destroyed him trying to be with me. He lost everything. His inheritance, his family, his prospects. And do you know what happened? He grew to resent me. Every struggle, every sacrifice became my fault. We divorced within 5 years, and he drank himself to death before he turned 40. She'd leaned forward, her manicured hands folded on the desk. "I will not let my son repeat my mistakes. You're on a partial scholarship, aren't you? One phone call from me and that scholarship disappears. Your grades are excellent, but there are plenty of excellent students who need financial aid. Without that scholarship, you'll have to drop out." My mouth had gone dry. "But that's not all," Victoria had said, her smile growing wider. "Marcus thinks he's ready to give up his trust fund for you, to make his own way in the world. Young love, very romantic. But what he doesn't understand is that I can ensure he fails. Every door he tries to open, I can close. I have connections everywhere, Miss Campbell." I'd sat frozen, understanding for the first time the true scope of the Ashford family's power. "So here's what's going to happen," Victoria had said. "You're going to break up with my son. You're going to tell him you've realized the two of you are incompatible. You're going to give him back his grandmother's ring and walk away. And in return, I'll make sure you graduate with your scholarship intact." The offer was both generous and terrible. "And if I refuse?" I'd asked, though I already knew the answer. "Then you'll both be destroyed. Marcus will never forgive himself for ruining your future, and you'll never forgive yourself for ruining his." She'd paused, and for just a moment, I'd seen genuine pain in her eyes. "I'm saving you both from the mistakes I made, Miss Campbell. Someday you might even thank me. I should have told Marcus everything, should have run straight to him and confessed what his mother had threatened. But I was 22 and terrified and carrying a secret I hadn't shared with anyone yet. I was pregnant with Marcus's child." I'd broken up with Marcus 3 days later in our favorite coffee shop, watching his heart break in real time while I told him lies about wanting different things from life. I'd given him back the emerald ring and walked away from everything we'd built together. 3 weeks after that, I'd lost the baby. A miscarriage at 8 weeks, sudden and devastating. I'd bled alone in a hospital emergency room, grieving not just for the child I'd lost, but for the future that was already gone. When Wallace Morrison, a business acquaintance of my father's, 12 years older than me, stable and safe and nothing like Marcus, asked me to marry him 6 months later, I'd said yes. I thought I could learn to love him. I was wrong about that too. I found the dress at a consignment shop on Thursday afternoon, tucked between outdated prom gowns and church-appropriate suits. Navy blue with long sleeves, modest but elegant. The price tag said $45. It came from Nordstrom originally, the woman behind the counter assured me. Someone's loss is your gain. I paid cash, watching my small buffer of emergency money disappear. At home, I pressed the dress carefully and hung it in the back of my closet, trying not to think about how Wallace would find something wrong with it. He always did. That evening, Wallace emerged from his dressing room in a perfectly tailored tuxedo that probably cost more than I spent on clothes in an entire year. His silver hair was slicked back, and he wore his father's gold watch, the one that reminded everyone he came from money, even if his business was drowning in debt. I heard it sometimes, late at night, the worried phone calls about loans and deadlines and clients jumping ship. This gala was his desperate attempt to salvage something, to make connections that might save him from bankruptcy. "You ready?" he asked, then stopped when he saw me. His face immediately darkened. "That's what you're wearing?" I looked down at my dress, suddenly seeing it through his eyes. What had seemed elegant in the store now felt shabby and outdated. "I thought it looked nice," I said quietly. "It was the best I could find with the budget you gave me." Wallace shook his head in disgust. "It'll have to do. Just try to stay in the background tonight. Don't draw attention to yourself. And for God's sake, don't talk about anything personal. These are serious business people." The ride to the Grand Hyatt was silent, except for the classical music Wallace preferred. I sat beside him, my hands folded in my lap, touching the silver locket at my throat without thinking. I wore it every day, tucked beneath my clothes where no one could see it, where Wallace didn't know it existed. The hotel ballroom was exactly what I expected. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and the kind of people who measured their worth in stock portfolios and vacation homes. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the forced laughter of business networking. "Stay here," Wallace commanded, pointing to a spot near the bar where shadows from the decorative plants would hide me. "I need to find some people. Don't wander off." I nodded and watched him stride away, shoulders straight with false confidence. 20 minutes passed. I stood in my assigned spot, nursing a glass of water and watching the crowd. Business executives laughed too loudly at each other's jokes. Their wives compared jewelry and vacation plans. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they belonged. I felt like a shadow in my $45 dress. Then the energy in the room shifted. Conversations quieted. Heads turned toward the main entrance. I craned my neck to see what was causing the commotion, and my breath caught in my throat. A tall man in an impeccably tailored tuxedo had entered the ballroom. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, and he moved with the quiet confidence that only comes from real power, not the desperate imitation of it that Wallace wore like ill-fitting clothes. Even from across the room, there was something familiar about the way he carried himself, something that made my heart skip in a way it hadn't in decades. "That's him," someone whispered nearby. "That's Marcus Ashford, the new CEO. Marcus. The name hit me like a physical blow. It couldn't be. After 30 years, it couldn't possibly be him. But as he turned slightly, scanning the crowd with those dark eyes I knew so well, I knew with absolute certainty that it was Marcus Ashford, the man I had loved with every fiber of my being when I was 22. The man whose child I had carried for 2 months before losing everything. The man I had been forced to walk away from, leaving my heart buried in that college town where we had planned our entire future together. He was older now, distinguished in a way that spoke of success and power. But his face was the same. The strong jawline, the intense eyes that seemed to see straight through people, the way he held his head slightly tilted when he was thinking. My Marcus, who wasn't mine anymore and hadn't been for 3 decades. I pressed myself further into the shadows, my heart pounding so hard I was sure people could hear it. Across the room, Wallace spotted Marcus and immediately began pushing through the crowd toward him. I watched in horror as my husband approached the man I had never stopped loving, his hand extended for a business handshake, his smile wide and predatory. Marcus accepted the handshake politely, but I could see even from a distance that he wasn't really listening to whatever Wallace was saying. His eyes were scanning the crowd. searching. And then, as if drawn by some invisible force, his gaze found mine. The world stopped. For a moment that lasted an eternity, Marcus Ashford stared directly at me across that crowded ballroom. His face went completely white, and I saw his lips part in shock. The businessman facade crumbled, and for one heartbeat he was 25 again, looking at me the way he used to look at me when we were young and believed that love could conquer anything. Then he was moving, walking straight toward me as if the 100 other people in that room didn't exist. Wallace continued talking to empty air for several seconds before realizing Marcus was no longer listening. I saw my husband's confusion turn to alarm as he followed Marcus's line of sight and realized he was heading directly for me. "Excuse me," Marcus said to Wallace without looking at him. His voice was deeper now, roughened by years and success, but it still made my knees weak. "I need to speak with your wife." Marcus didn't hesitate. He walked straight to where I stood frozen in the shadows and stopped just close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and sophisticated. Nothing like the aftershave he used to wear in college. "Darlene," he said, and my name on his lips after 30 years made my eyes fill with tears I hadn't given myself permission to shed. "Marcus," I whispered back, barely able to find my voice. Without hesitation, he reached out and took both my hands in his, the same way he used to do when we were young. His hands were warm and steady, and I could feel the weight of his wedding ring, or rather the absence of it. His ring finger was bare. "I've been looking for you for 30 years, he said, his voice thick with emotion. His dark eyes were bright with unshed tears, and when he spoke again, his words carried across the suddenly silent ballroom. "I still love you." The sound of Wallace's champagne glass hitting the marble floor echoed like a gunshot through the stunned silence that followed. "This is ridiculous." Wallace's voice cut through the moment like a blade. He stepped between Marcus and me, his face flushed with humiliation and rage. "Darlene, what the hell is going on here?" I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. How could I explain 30 years of buried heartache in front of a room full of strangers? Marcus's eyes never left my face. "Could we speak privately?" he asked, his voice gentle but carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Wallace laughed harshly. "Privately? She's my wife. Anything you have to say to her, you can say in front of me." "No," Marcus said simply. "I can't." The weight of his gaze was almost unbearable. I could see the questions there, the hurt that time hadn't healed, the love that had somehow survived 3 decades of separation. But I could also see Wallace's panic, the way his hands shook as he realized his carefully planned evening was crumbling around him. "Marcus-y," I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't. Not here. Not like this." He nodded slowly, understanding in a way that Wallace never had. "Of course. But Darlene," he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, white with silver embossing. "Please call me. We need to talk." I took the card with trembling fingers, our hands brushing for just a moment. The contact sent electricity through my entire body, a reminder of what it felt like to be touched with love instead of possession. "We're leaving," Wallace announced loudly, grabbing my arm with enough force to bruise. "Now." Marcus's expression darkened as he saw Wallace's grip on me. For a moment I thought he might intervene, but I shook my head slightly and he stepped back, his jaw clenched with obvious effort. "I'll be waiting for your call," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving mine. Wallace dragged me through the ballroom, past the staring faces and whispered speculations. I clutched Marcus's business card in my free hand, the sharp edges pressing into my palm like a lifeline. The ride home was a nightmare of Wallace's rage, but I barely heard him. My mind was spinning backward through time to a small college town where I had been young and fearless and desperately in love. "Listening to me?" Wallace's voice finally penetrated my thoughts. "I asked you a question, Darlene. How long have you been in contact with him?" "I haven't," I said truthfully. "I haven't seen Marcus since college. I had no idea he would be there tonight." "You expect me to believe that? The way he looked at you?" The way he said he still loves you? Wallace's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Who is he to you? I took a breath, knowing this conversation was inevitable. He was my fiancé. 30 years ago, before I met you. We were engaged to be married. The car swerved slightly before Wallace regained control. Engaged, he repeated flatly. And you never thought to mention this? It was over before we met. I didn't think it mattered. Clearly it wasn't over, Wallace spat. Not if he's been searching for you for 3 decades. Not if he can walk into a room and declare his love in front of everyone. We pulled into our driveway, and Wallace killed the engine. For a moment we sat in silence, the tension thick enough to choke on. You're not to see him, Wallace said finally. You're not to call him. You're not to have any contact with him whatsoever. Do you understand? I looked at my husband of 25 years, this man who controlled every aspect of my life, and for the first time, I felt something other than fear or resignation. I felt anger. I understand, I said quietly, but I kept Marcus's card clutched in my hand. That night I lay awake in bed while Wallace locked himself in his study, making frantic phone calls to his business partners. Through the thick walls, I could hear his voice rising and falling in desperate explanations. I stared at Marcus's business card in the dim light from my bedside lamp. Simple white cardstock with silver embossing. Marcus Ashford, Chief Executive Officer, Ashford Industries. A phone number, an email address. 30 years of separation reduced to a few lines of text. I should have told Wallace years ago. Should have mentioned casually over breakfast that I had once known someone named Marcus Ashford. But how do you explain that you married one man while still desperately in love with another? I pulled out the small wooden jewelry box from its hiding place and opened it with trembling fingers. The emerald ring caught the lamplight, throwing tiny green reflections across my palm. It's been waiting for the right woman, Marcus had said that night by the campus lake. It's been waiting for you. I had worn it for exactly 3 months before Victoria Ashford destroyed everything. Or had she? For the first time in 30 years, I allowed myself to wonder if Victoria had actually done me a favor. If her cruelty had inadvertently saved me from a different kind of trap. She had been so certain that love wasn't enough, that struggle and sacrifice would turn into resentment and regret. But looking at the life I'd built with Wallace, the silence, the control, the slow suffocation of my spirit, I realized that safety had been its own kind of prison. I picked up my phone and dialed before I could lose my nerve. Darlene, Marcus answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting by the phone. Are you all right? You sound upset. I'm leaving him, I said without preamble, my voice steadier than I felt. Wallace, I'm leaving him, and I want to accept your job offer. There was a moment of silence. Then Marcus's voice came through, warm and sure. Where are you? Home. But I can't stay here. I needed to tell you. I needed you to know that I'm choosing this. I'm choosing to be free. Listen to me carefully, Marcus said, his voice taking on that calm, authoritative tone I remembered from when he was solving problems in college. Don't leave tonight. It's not safe. Wallace is angry and unpredictable, and I need you to be careful. Can you wait until morning? I'll have my lawyer, Raymond Kemp, meet us somewhere. We'll do this properly, legally. Raymond Kemp? I asked. Your lawyer is named after a detective? Marcus laughed softly. He's actually a private investigator and a lawyer. He's been helping me search for you for the past 15 years. Darlene, there are things you need to know about Wallace. Things Raymond discovered. My blood ran cold. What things? Not over the phone. Tomorrow morning, can you meet me at the Blue Moon Cafe on 16th Street? Do you know it? I did. It was my secret refuge, the place I went when Wallace's control felt too suffocating. How did you know about that cafe? Raymond's been watching over you for the past 6 months, Marcus admitted. Once we found you, I needed to make sure you were safe. I needed to understand your life before I disrupted it. Darlene, I'm so sorry. I know it sounds like stalking, but I was terrified of approaching you the wrong way, of scaring you off again. I should have been angry, should have felt violated by the invasion of privacy. Instead, I felt protected, seen. For the first time in decades, someone had been paying attention to what I needed, where I went, what made me feel safe. 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, I said. I'll be there. I'll be waiting, Marcus replied. I've been waiting for 30 years. What's one more night? I woke early before Wallace stirred in his separate bedroom. He'd been sleeping apart from me for the past 5 years, claiming my restlessness disturbed his sleep. I'd been grateful for the distance. At 9:30, I heard his car pull out of the driveway. A golf meeting with potential investors, according to the calendar on his phone that he'd forgotten to lock. Desperate men making desperate plans. I dressed carefully in jeans and a simple sweater, things Wallace had always criticized as too casual for a woman of my position. I left my wedding ring on the bathroom counter. The drive to the Blue Moon Cafe felt like traveling through a dream. Every street corner held memories of the person I used to be before Wallace, before the miscarriage, before Victoria Ashford's cold office and colder ultimatum. Marcus was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with another man, late 50s, sharp eyes, the bearing of someone who noticed everything. Darlene, Marcus stood as I approached, and for a moment we just looked at each other in the morning light streaming through the cafe windows. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure I would, I admitted. I almost turned around 3 times. But you didn't. Marcus pulled out a chair for me, a gesture so achingly familiar that I had to blink back tears. Darlene, this is Raymond Kemp. He's the investigator I mentioned. Raymond extended his hand with a sympathetic smile. Mrs. Thornton, I'm glad to finally meet you properly. I feel like I've known you for months. You've been following me, I said, sitting down. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. Observing, Raymond corrected gently, making sure you were safe, and conducting some research into your husband's business practices. Why would you research Wallace? Marcus and Raymond exchanged a glance. Then Marcus reached across the table and took my hand. Because 30 years ago, when you broke up with me, Marcus said quietly, I was devastated. I didn't understand why. Nothing you said made sense. You loved me, I knew you did. So I started searching for answers. It took me years to track down the private detective my mother had hired to follow you. Victoria hired someone to follow me? To make sure you stayed away from me, Marcus confirmed. When I finally found the detective, he told me about your pregnancy, about the miscarriage, about the meeting in my mother's office. I pulled my hand back, feeling exposed. You knew? All this time you knew? Not all this time, Marcus said gently. I found out about the pregnancy 8 years ago when my mother was dying. She confessed everything, the threats, the manipulation, her own failed relationship that made her so desperate to protect me from the same fate. He pulled out a photograph from his jacket pocket and slid it across the table. It was old, the colors faded, but I recognized it immediately. Me at 22, leaving a campus building, looking thin and haunted. This was taken 6 months after you broke up with me, Marcus said. 3 months after the miscarriage. And this, he pulled out another photograph, was taken the same week. The second photo showed Wallace Morrison, younger but recognizable, watching me from across the campus quad. The date stamp in the corner read, October 1995. Wallace was following you, Raymond explained, opening a folder thick with documents. We found records of his presence at Colorado State during the fall semester of 1995. He wasn't enrolled. He had no business being there. But he was there, Mrs. Thornton, watching you, waiting for the right moment to approach. My stomach turned. What are you saying? I'm saying Wallace Thornton knew who you were before he coincidentally met you at your father's business dinner, Raymond said. He knew about your breakup with Marcus. He knew about the pregnancy loss. And he specifically chose to pursue you when you were at your most vulnerable. Marcus's hand found mine again. Darlene, Wallace didn't fall in love with you. He targeted you. You were the woman Marcus Ashford loved and lost. Dating you, marrying you. It was a way to possess something I couldn't have. No, I whispered. But even as I said it, memories were clicking into place. The way Wallace had seemed to know exactly what to say to comfort me about my past relationship. The way he'd been so understanding about my reluctance to talk about college. The way he'd isolated me from anyone who might have known about Marcus. There's more, Raymond said quietly. Wallace has been actively sabotaging Marcus's attempts to find you for the past 30 years. Raymond spread documents across the table. Detective reports, financial records, correspondence. Every investigator Marcus hired, Wallace found a way to pay off or mislead. He fed them false information about your whereabouts. He created fake paper trails leading to different states. When Marcus got close to finding you in Denver, Wallace moved you to a different neighborhood and changed your contact information. How? I asked, my voice hollow. How did he even know Marcus was looking? Because Wallace was obsessed with you, Raymond explained. He monitored social media, hired his own investigators to track Marcus's investigators. He saw it as a game, keeping Marcus's lost love just out of reach. Marcus's voice was tight with controlled anger. 6 months ago, Raymond finally broke through Wallace's barriers. We found you living in Denver, married to Wallace Thornton. I couldn't believe it. The woman I'd spent 3 decades searching for had been with the man who'd been sabotaging my search the entire time. That's when I started digging into Wallace's background, Raymond continued. And what I found was disturbing. He pulled out another file, this one marked with red tabs. Wallace Thornton was married once before, Darlene. Did he ever tell you that? The cafe seemed to tilt around me. No. He said I was his first marriage. Her name was Jennifer Hartley, Raymond said softly. They were married for 3 years. She committed suicide in 1992, leaving a note that described years of psychological abuse, isolation from friends and family, financial control, constant criticism. He slid a photocopy of a police report across the table. I couldn't bring myself to read it. After Jennifer's death, there was an investigation, but no charges were filed, Raymond explained. Wallace moved from Chicago to Denver, changed firms, started over. Your father's business connection gave him an entry into a new social circle where nobody knew about his past. I felt like I was going to be sick. He chose me because I was already broken, because he knew I wouldn't fight back. Yes, Marcus said gently, and I'm so sorry, Darlene. If I had found you sooner, if I hadn't let my mother's threats stop me from fighting for you. This isn't your fault, I interrupted. Victoria threatened to destroy both our lives. You were 25 years old. You couldn't have known. But I should have fought harder, Marcus insisted. I should have told my mother to go to hell and married you anyway. We could have survived whatever she threw at us. Maybe, I said quietly. Or maybe we would have struggled and resented each other, just like Victoria predicted. We'll never know what might have been. But Marcus, I looked at him directly, seeing the pain and regret in his eyes. We can decide what happens now. Marcus pulled out another business card, this one with handwriting on the back. I meant what I said last night about the job offer. Director of Community Relations at Ashford Industries. You'd develop partnerships with schools and literacy programs. It's meaningful work, Darlene. Work that would use your English degree and your passion for education. How much does it pay? I asked, surprised by my own practicality. $130,000 a year, plus benefits. You'd have your own office, your own team, complete autonomy over your department. Marcus paused. I want you to have financial independence. I want you to never again be dependent on someone else's generosity for your basic needs. The number made me dizzy. It was more money than I'd ever imagined earning. Enough to rent my own apartment, buy my own car, make my own choices. But there's something you need to know before you accept, Raymond interjected. Something about Wallace's current financial situation. He pulled out the final folder, this one thick with highlighted documents and sticky notes. Wallace is under FBI investigation for money laundering and fraud. His real estate company has been accepting investments from questionable sources, we believe organized crime, and using development projects to clean the money. The FBI has been building a case for 8 months, Raymond continued. They have financial records, wire transfers, testimony from Wallace's business partner, Jonathan Pierce, who's agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. I stared at the documents, seeing numbers and transactions that meant nothing to me, but clearly meant everything to the investigators. Wallace is going to be arrested, probably within the next 2 weeks, Raymond said. When that happens, all his assets will be frozen. If you're still legally married to him, you could be implicated as well. Or at the very least, you'll be dragged through the investigation and trial. You need to file for divorce immediately, Marcus urged. You need to separate yourself from Wallace legally and financially before the arrest happens. I have a colleague who specializes in divorce law, Raymond added. Her name is Grace Montgomery. She's the best in Denver, and she's already familiar with your situation. I can call her right now if you'd like. I looked at Marcus, then at Raymond, then at the mountain of evidence spread across our cafe table. Evidence that my husband of 25 years was a criminal who had married me as some kind of sick trophy, who had spent 3 decades sabotaging the one man who truly loved me. Yes, I said, my voice stronger than I'd expected. Call her. I want to file for divorce today. Marcus's hand squeezed mine. You don't have to do this alone. I'll help you through every step. I know, I said. But Marcus, I need you to understand something. I'm not leaving Wallace to run to you. I'm leaving him to run to myself. I need to stand on my own feet first. I need to know I can survive independently before I can even think about us. I understand, Marcus said softly. And Darlene, that's exactly why I know this time will be different. You're not the scared 22-year-old who let my mother intimidate her. You're a woman who knows her own worth. And that woman is worth waiting for. I returned home that afternoon to find Wallace waiting in the kitchen, a bottle of scotch on the counter, and fury in his eyes. Where have you been? He demanded. Having coffee, I said calmly, setting my purse on the counter. Inside it was Grace Montgomery's business card and a manila envelope containing divorce papers to be filed Monday morning. For 4 hours? I lost track of time. Wallace stood, swaying slightly. He'd clearly been drinking. You met with him, didn't you? With Marcus Ashford. After I explicitly told you not to. I met his gaze steadily. Yes, I met with Marcus, and I accepted his job offer. The slap came so fast I didn't have time to move. My head snapped to the side, and I tasted blood where my teeth cut the inside of my cheek. For a moment, we both stood frozen. Wallace shocked by his own violence, me shocked that he'd finally made physical what had been psychological for so long. Darlene, Wallace started, but I held up my hand. Don't, I said quietly. Don't apologize. Don't explain. Don't make excuses. We both know this was always where we were heading. I touched my cheek, feeling it throb. I'm leaving you, Wallace. I filed for divorce. I'm taking the job with Ashford Industries. And there's nothing you can do to stop me. Wallace laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Nothing I can do? Darlene, I will destroy you in court. I have the best lawyers in Denver. You'll walk away with nothing. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, I don't think you will. You see, Wallace, while you were spending the morning golfing and drinking, I was meeting with an FBI investigator who's very interested in talking to me about your business practices. The color drained from Wallace's face. That's right, I continued. I know about the money laundering. I know about Jonathan Pierce's testimony. I know that you're about to be arrested and that everything you own is about to be seized by federal agents. You can't, Wallace stammered. I can and I will. I'm cooperating fully with the investigation. I'm providing them with everything I know about your finances, your associates, your business deals. And when they arrest you, and they will arrest you, Wallace, I'll be far away from you, building a life that actually belongs to me. Wallace's hand shot out, grabbing my wrist with bruising force. You ungrateful bitch! After everything I've given you, given me? I wrenched my arm free, years of suppressed rage finally breaking through. You didn't give me anything, Wallace. You bought my compliance. You purchased my silence. You collected me like a trophy to prove to yourself that you could have what Marcus Ashford couldn't keep. But I'm not a possession, and I'm not your trophy. I'm a person, and I'm done being yours. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. If you walk out that door, Wallace called after me, his voice shaking, don't ever come back. I paused in the doorway and looked back at my husband of 25 years one last time. I won't, I said simply, and walked out into the Denver afternoon sunshine, leaving my wedding ring on the kitchen counter behind me. Marcus was waiting in his car at the end of the driveway, just as he'd promised. When I climbed into the passenger seat, he didn't ask questions. He just drove, one hand reaching over to hold mine while I cried. Tears of grief, of relief, of terror and exhilaration all mixed together. Where are we going? I finally asked. Wherever you want, Marcus replied. It's your choice, Darlene. It's always been your choice. Your place, I decided. Just for tonight. Tomorrow I'll start looking for my own apartment. But tonight I just need to feel safe. Then that's where we'll go, Marcus said. And Darlene, you are safe. I promise you, you're safe now. For the first time in 25 years, I believed it. I woke in Marcus's guest bedroom to the sight of the Rocky Mountains painted gold by the rising sun. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was. Then it all came rushing back. The confrontation with Wallace. The slap that had finally made physical what had been emotional violence for 25 years. Walking out with nothing but my purse and the clothes on my back. I touched my cheek gently. It was tender, but the swelling had gone down overnight. There was a soft knock on the door. Darlene, are you awake? I made coffee. Marcus. His voice was careful, respectful of boundaries even in his own home. Come in, I called, pulling the borrowed robe tighter around myself. He entered carrying a tray with coffee, toast, and fresh fruit. He'd clearly been up for hours. He was already dressed in jeans and a sweater, his hair still damp from the shower. How did you sleep? He asked, setting the tray on the bedside table. Better than I have in years, I admitted. No listening for footsteps, no wondering if I'd said or done something wrong. Just quiet. Marcus sat carefully on the edge of the bed, maintaining a respectful distance. His eyes went to the bruise on my cheek, and his jaw tightened. I should have come to the door with you yesterday, he said. I should have. You did exactly what I needed, I interrupted. You waited. You let me handle it myself. Marcus, for 25 years, men have been making decisions for me. Victoria telling me to leave you. Wallace controlling every aspect of my life. Yesterday was the first time in decades that I fought my own battle. Don't take that away from me by second-guessing it. He nodded slowly. You're right. I'm sorry. It's just seeing him hurt you. He can't hurt me anymore, I said firmly. I won't let him. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, drinking coffee and watching the morning light spread across the mountains. Grace Montgomery called while you were sleeping, Marcus said finally. She filed the divorce papers first thing this morning. Wallace will be served by end of business today. That fast? Grace doesn't waste time. She's also filed for a restraining order based on yesterday's assault. If Wallace comes within 500 feet of you, he'll be arrested. I absorbed this information, feeling simultaneously protected and terrified. What happens now? Now you decide what you want to do, Marcus said. Raymond is coordinating with the FBI. They want to interview you this week about Wallace's business practices. Grace needs to meet with you to discuss the divorce settlement, though given Wallace's impending arrest, there may not be much to settle. And the job? Marcus smiled. The job is real, Darlene. If you want it, it's yours. You can start whenever you're ready. Next week, next month. No pressure. Next Monday, I decided. I want to start next Monday. I need to start building my new life immediately, before I lose my nerve. Then Monday it is. Marcus stood, giving me space. I have some calls to make. Take your time getting ready. We can go apartment hunting this afternoon if you'd like, or we can just drive around the city, or sit here and do nothing. Whatever you need. After he left, I sat alone with my coffee, looking out at the mountains that had witnessed so much of my life. My college years with Marcus, my miscarriage, my marriage to Wallace, and now this strange new beginning. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Beth Thornton. I heard you left Wallace. I'm so proud of you. If you need anything, testimony for the divorce, character witnesses, anything, please call me. You deserve to be free." I saved the number, feeling tears prick my eyes. Even Wallace's own sister was supporting my escape. I was in my new apartment, a modest one-bedroom in Capitol Hill that I'd rented with my first paycheck advance from Ashford Industries, when my phone exploded with news alerts. Denver developer arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. FBI raids Morrison Properties offices. Businessman faces 15 years for money laundering. I turned on the television to see Wallace being led out of his office in handcuffs, surrounded by FBI agents. His face was ashen, his expensive suit rumpled. The man who had controlled every aspect of my life for a quarter-century looked small and frightened on camera. The news anchor's voice filled my apartment. "Wallace Thornton, 69, prominent Denver real estate developer, was arrested this morning on charges of money laundering, wire fraud, and tax evasion. Federal investigators say Thornton used his development company, Morrison Properties, to launder money from organized crime sources over the past 15 years. The screen cut to FBI Special Agent Maria Gonzalez at a press conference. "This investigation has uncovered a sophisticated scheme involving shell companies, fraudulent property valuations, and laundered funds totaling approximately $47 million. We believe Mr. Thornton's activities go back at least 2 decades. My phone rang. "Marcus. "Are you watching?" he asked. "Yes." "Are you okay?" I thought about it. "I think I am. Is that strange? I should feel something. Guilt, maybe, or satisfaction. But I just feel empty, like I'm watching a stranger's life fall apart." "That's because he was a stranger," Marcus said gently. "You never really knew him, Darlene. He never let you." The television cut to footage of Jonathan Pierce, Wallace's business partner, being escorted into the federal building. The caption read, "Key witness agrees to testify against Thornton." "There's something else," Marcus said carefully. "Raymond got a call from the FBI this morning. They want to talk to you again, but this time about Wallace's first wife." My blood ran cold. "Jennifer?" "They're reopening the investigation into her death. Beth Thornton came forward with some of Jennifer's old diaries. Apparently Jennifer gave them to Beth before she died, asking her to keep them safe. The FBI thinks there might be evidence of coercion or harassment that led to her suicide." I sank onto my couch, overwhelmed. He destroyed her, just like he tried to destroy me. "But he didn't destroy you," Marcus said firmly. "You got out. You survived. And now you're going to help make sure he faces consequences for everything he's done." That afternoon, I met with FBI agents in Grace Montgomery's office. They showed me excerpts from Jennifer Hartley's diaries, pages that read like a mirror of my own experience. "Wallace told me today that I'm too fat to attend his company party. I weigh 118 pounds. He gave me $50 and told me to buy a gym membership instead of groceries. He found my old college yearbook and burned it in the fireplace, said I didn't need memories of a life before him. I tried to call my sister today. Wallace has changed all the passwords on the phones. He says if I need to talk to family, I can do it when he's home to supervise, to make sure I don't say anything embarrassing about our marriage. I don't know who I am anymore. I look in the mirror and see a ghost. Wallace says I'm being dramatic. Maybe he's right. Maybe I am crazy." The final entry was dated 3 days before her death. "I can't do this anymore. I can't be his doll, his possession, his proof that he's a good man. If I stay, I'll disappear completely. If I leave, he'll destroy me. He's made that very clear. There's only one way out where I get to make the choice myself. I'm sorry, Beth. I'm sorry, Mom and Dad. But this is the only way I can be free." I couldn't read anymore. I pushed the papers back across the table to Agent Gonzalez, my hands shaking. "Mrs. Thornton," the agent said gently, "we believe Wallace Thornton has a pattern of targeting vulnerable women, isolating them, and psychologically breaking them down. You're the second wife we know about. We're concerned there may be others, girlfriends, partners between his marriages. Your testimony could help us establish this pattern." "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Everything. Every instance of control, isolation, financial abuse, verbal degradation, threats. We're building a case that goes beyond money laundering. We want to make sure Wallace Thornton never has the opportunity to hurt another woman." I looked at Grace, who nodded encouragingly. Then I looked at Marcus, who had insisted on being there for support. "I'll tell you everything," I said. "But I need you to understand. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing this so Jennifer Hartley's death means something. I'm doing this so the next woman doesn't have to choose between losing herself and losing her life." 3 months later, May 2026, Wallace's trial was set for July, but his lawyers had arranged for him to see me one last time before the proceedings began. Grace advised against it, but I needed closure. The meeting took place in a sterile room at the county jail. Wallace sat across from me in an orange jumpsuit, looking years older than the man I'd left 3 months ago. His silver hair had gone completely white, and there were deep lines around his eyes that I'd never noticed before. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. His voice lacked the commanding tone I'd lived with for 25 years. "I'm not here for you," I said. "I'm here for me. I need to look at you and know that I'm really free." Wallace nodded, his hands folded on the metal table between us. "I suppose that's fair." We sat in silence for a moment. Then Wallace spoke again, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm sorry." I stared at him, genuinely shocked. "What?" "I'm sorry. For everything. For targeting you when you were vulnerable. For isolating you from your friends and family. For controlling you. For hitting you." He looked up, and I saw tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry for turning you into a prisoner in your own home." "Why?" I asked. "Why did you do it?" Wallace was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I could. Because you were beautiful and broken, and you belonged to someone else first. Because every time I looked at you, I got to feel like I'd won something Marcus Ashford couldn't keep." He wiped his eyes roughly. "And because somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that control was the same thing as love." "It's not," I said firmly. "I know that now." Wallace laughed bitterly. "Sitting in here with nothing, facing 15 years in prison, losing everything. I finally understand what I had and what I destroyed. But I know you didn't come here for my epiphany." "No," I agreed. "I came to tell you that I forgive you." Wallace's head snapped up. "What?" "I forgive you, Wallace. Not because you deserve it. You don't. Not because what you did was acceptable. It wasn't. I forgive you because I need to let go of the anger and resentment. I need to be free of you completely, and I can't do that while I'm still holding on to hatred." Tears streamed down Wallace's face. "Darlene, but forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation," I continued. "It doesn't mean I'll speak on your behalf at sentencing. It doesn't mean I'll visit you in prison or wait for you when you get out. It means I'm choosing to release the hold you have on my emotions. I'm choosing peace over vengeance." I stood, preparing to leave. "For what it's worth," Wallace said, "I did love you. In my broken, twisted way, I loved you." "That wasn't love, Wallace," I said gently. "That was possession. But maybe someday, after years of therapy and reflection, you'll understand the difference." I walked out of that jail knowing I would never see Wallace Thornton again. And for the first time in 25 years, that thought didn't frighten me. It freed me. September 2026, 8 months after the gala, Marcus picked me up early on a Saturday morning, refusing to tell me where we were going. "It's a surprise," he said, that familiar mischievous glint in his eye that reminded me of the boy he'd been in college. We drove northwest out of Denver, the mountains growing larger in the windshield. After an hour, I recognized the route. We were heading to Fort Collins, to Colorado State. "Marcus, what are we doing?" "You'll see." He pulled into the campus parking lot, and we walked hand in hand past buildings I hadn't seen in over 30 years. The library where we'd first met, the student union where we'd shared countless coffees, the English building where I dreamed of becoming a teacher. Finally, we reached the lake, the small campus lake where Marcus had proposed to me 31 years ago. It looked exactly the same. Willow trees draped over the water, ducks gliding across the surface, students studying on blankets spread across the grass. Marcus led me to a bench overlooking the water, the same bench where he'd knelt with his grandmother's emerald ring. 31 years ago, Marcus began, his voice thick with emotion, I asked you to marry me at this spot. I was 25 years old and thought that love was enough, that if we just loved each other hard enough, we could overcome anything. Family disapproval, financial struggles, social pressure. We were young, I said softly. We were, Marcus agreed. And we lost 30 years because other people made choices for us, because we let fear dictate our actions, because we didn't fight hard enough for what we had. He turned to face me fully, taking both my hands in his. But Darlene, I'm not that 25-year-old boy anymore. I'm a 59-year-old man who spent 3 decades learning that love isn't enough by itself. Love needs respect. It needs trust. It needs 2 people who choose each other freely, every single day. Not because they need each other, but because they want to build a life together. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out the emerald ring, his grandmother's ring that I'd worn for 3 months in 1995, that I'd carried hidden in my jewelry box for 30 years after. He didn't kneel this time. Instead, he stood before me as an equal, offering rather than asking. Darlene Campbell Thornton, he said, tears streaming down his face. I'm not asking you to marry me because I saved you from Wallace. I'm not asking because we have history together. I'm not even asking because I've loved you for 31 years. He paused, looking directly into my eyes. I'm asking you to marry me because of who you are right now, because you're the strongest person I've ever known, because you saved yourself when it mattered most, because you chose freedom over safety and truth over comfort. Because every day for the past 8 months, I've watched you build a life that's entirely yours, your apartment, your job, your independence, and I am in awe of you. He held up the ring, letting it catch the afternoon sunlight. I'm asking you to marry me because I want to spend the rest of my life choosing you, and I want you to have the freedom to choose me back. Or not. No pressure. No manipulation. Just an honest question. Darlene, will you marry me? I looked at the ring, the same ring I'd returned in heartbreak 30 years ago, thinking I was protecting us both. I looked at Marcus, older now, silver threading through his dark hair, lines around his eyes from years of searching and hoping and waiting. I looked at myself, reflected in his eyes, no longer the broken 22-year-old who'd let other people make her choices. Not the controlled, suffocated woman who'd spent 25 years in a prison of marble floors and cold silence. I was Darlene, 58 years old, Director of Community Relations at Ashford Industries, living in my own apartment, paying my own bills, making my own choices. And I was ready to choose love, not because I needed it, but because I wanted it. Yes, I said, smiling through tears, not because you waited for me, not because of our history, but because I choose you, Marcus Ashford. I choose you today as the person I am now, choosing the person you are now. Marcus slipped the ring onto my finger, the 3rd time he'd done so. The first time had been youth and promise. The second had been returning it in sacrifice and sorrow. This time it was choice and certainty. He kissed me there by the lake, and I could taste tears, his and mine mingling together, salt water and healing and second chances. Thank you, he whispered against my lips. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for surviving. Thank you for finding your way back to me. Thank you for waiting, I replied. Thank you for never stopping your search. Thank you for loving me enough to let me save myself. March 2027. 9 months later, we were married on a cold Saturday afternoon at the Blue Moon Cafe, the place where we'd reunited, where I'd made the decision to reclaim my life. 50 guests filled the small space, not society's elite, but real people who'd supported my journey. Grace Montgomery stood as my maid of honor, fierce and proud. Raymond Kemp gave a toast about persistence and second chances. Beth Thornton attended with her new boyfriend, having finally left her own controlling marriage inspired by my courage. My divorce from Wallace had been finalized in November. He'd pled guilty to all charges and was serving 15 years in federal prison. The civil suit from Jennifer Hartley's family was still pending, but Wallace had agreed to cooperate fully, finally taking responsibility for his role in her death. I didn't think about him on my wedding day. He'd taken enough of my life. Instead, I focused on the man standing before me in a simple gray suit, his eyes bright with joy as we exchanged vows we'd written ourselves. "I promise to never make you feel trapped," Marcus said, his voice steady and sure. "I promise to celebrate your independence, even as I cherish our partnership. I promise to choose you every day and to honor your freedom to choose me back." "I promise to never run away from fear again," I replied. "I promise to trust that love can be both powerful and gentle. I promise to choose you not because I need you, but because I want to build a life with you. A life where we're partners, not possessions." When the officiant pronounced us married, Marcus kissed me to applause and joyful tears from our guests. At the reception, Marcus surprised me with one final gift, a framed certificate establishing the Jennifer Hartley Memorial Scholarship Fund at Colorado State University. "For young women pursuing education despite financial hardship," Marcus explained, "so they never have to choose between their dreams and their survival, so they never have to sacrifice love for security." I looked at the certificate, seeing Jennifer's name honored instead of forgotten, and felt tears stream down my face. "You named it after her," I whispered. "After the woman your mother might have been. After the woman I almost became. After the women who deserve to be remembered," Marcus said, and celebrated, and saved. Later that evening, Marcus and I stood on the balcony of our hotel room, looking out at the Denver skyline with the Rocky Mountains rising beyond. The same mountains that had witnessed my college romance, my broken heart, my years of captivity, and now my liberation. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. I thought about the question seriously. Did I regret the 30 years we'd lost? The suffering I'd endured? The woman I might have been if Victoria Ashford had never threatened me? If I'd never married Wallace? "No," I said finally, surprising myself with the honesty of it. "I regret the pain, yes. I regret Jennifer's death. I regret that Wallace hurt so many people. But I don't regret my journey, because it made me who I am. And who I am is someone strong enough to deserve this happiness." Marcus kissed the top of my head. 58 isn't too late for a new beginning." 58 is exactly right," I replied. "We're old enough to know what love really means, old enough to appreciate what we have, and young enough to enjoy it for a very long time." As we stood there together, I thought about the girl I'd been at 22, so certain that she had to protect Marcus by walking away, so convinced that love wasn't strong enough to survive struggle. I wished I could tell her that she was wrong, that love is worth fighting for, that safety without freedom is just another kind of prison, that 30 years of pain can lead to a second chance more beautiful than the first. But maybe she had to learn those lessons herself. Maybe we all do. Behind us, in my purse, was a letter I'd written earlier that day. A letter to be donated to the domestic violence shelter where I now volunteered twice a week. "My name is Darlene Ashford, and I spent 25 years as a prisoner in my own marriage. I'm writing this to tell you that it's never too late to leave. It's never too late to reclaim your life. It's never too late to choose freedom over fear. You deserve more than survival. You deserve joy. You deserve partnership. You deserve love that builds you up instead of breaking you down. And most importantly, you deserve to save yourself. Not to wait for rescue. Not to hope things will change. To take action, make choices, and walk through the door marked freedom, even when you're terrified of what's on the other side. I did it at 57. You can do it at any age. Your life is waiting for you to claim it. Marcus and I went inside as the stars began to appear over the mountains. Tomorrow, we would fly to Italy for our honeymoon, a trip to all the places we dreamed of visiting when we were students. But tonight, we were exactly where we needed to be. Together. Free. Choosing each other not because we had to, but because we wanted to. And that made all the difference.